This is Northern Ireland, a country which has seen division, violence and death over decades of conflict. A conflict which lasted 40 years, claimed over 3,000 lives and destroyed families, businesses and normality for the people of Northern Ireland. On the 10th of April 1998, decades of brutality came to an end with the signing of the Good Friday Agreement, and the peace process for Northern Ireland began. It's been over 20 years since the signing of this agreement, and Northern Ireland has significantly moved on from its violent past. But yet Northern Ireland's negative representation in the media remains the same.
I think Northern Ireland will always have the legacy, as they call it. We'll always have that reputation that we're divided and violent. Thankfully, we've moved on. There is still violence on a much smaller scale. We still have paramilitaries. We still have crime that's linked to paramilitaries, and we still have division. We have more peace walls now in Belfast dividing people than we had at the time of the Good Friday Agreement. The people who live in those areas want them to be there. That's going to be a long process to develop that sort of trust between one side of the wall and the other side. But I think from a media point of view, from a news point of view, yes, we're always going to have that reputation and that relationship in the news media with violence and division. It doesn't necessarily define us anymore, but it is part and parcel of our life, and it is part and parcel of what we do in the news.
Only a couple of miles outside Belfast city centre, walls and gates still divide communities all over the city. Loyalist and Republican murals are still major parts of some estates. Paramilitary organisations still control communities, and the division between both sides is still clear. But over the past decade, Northern Ireland has expanded into many exciting ventures. Now with a bustling tourism industry, a vibrant film sector, and fantastic nightlife, Northern Ireland is slowly but surely putting itself back on the map for all the right reasons. But it seems no matter what good Northern Ireland does, its divisive past will always be the centre of its news stories. Chris Sherry is the managing director of the Ulster Tatler Group, a company which produces a number of magazines representing all the positive elements of life and people in Northern Ireland.
We have about 15 magazines in our stable. Probably obviously the most well known is the Ulster Tatler, but we also publish Ulster Tatler Interiors, and we have a new magazine coming out called Ulster Tatler Weddings. But I think initially when it came out, the troubles were really just starting, and it was quite difficult because obviously there wasn't really much social activity, so people really didn't go out at night. But no matter what, looking back over the old editions, there was always some type of social activity going on, and anything that was happening, the Tatler covered it. We like to highlight people from Northern Ireland who have shone in their particular field, just to highlight that Northern Ireland does punch above its weight for such a small country. I think it's only about 1.5 million. We have a lot of incredibly talented people when you consider how small the place is. We have people like Van Morrison, Seamus Heaney. The list is endless, really.
Though the majority of Northern Ireland has moved on from a country's violent past, there are still reminders that for some, the violence and division is far from over. 20 years after the signing of the Good Friday Agreement, young journalist Lyra McKee was shot dead by the new IRA after violence broke out in Derry. The 29-year-old's death caused uproar on both sides of the community. Lyra was a representation of everything positive Northern Ireland has to offer, a bright, enthusiastic and talented journalist who strived to represent this country in a positive light, but died at the hands of those who are not ready to move on. Lyra's death has brought things into perspective for many communities and politicians in Northern Ireland. After over 2 years without a government, storming politicians have finally decided to begin power-sharing talks once again. For many journalists and news organisations, the story ended when the conflict ended. For as long as the physical and mental divisions in Northern Ireland remain, a legacy of conflict and violence will continue. It is up to us to change our story and show the rest of the world what a great place Northern Ireland has become.